Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to give you my first uncensored reaction of a Variety article that came out just a few days ago. It's titled Toxic Fandom: How Hollywood is Battling Fans Who Are Just Out for Blood. From social media boot camps to superfan focus groups. Now, I'm sure, because I've already seen at least one video on this article where people are claiming that this is us winning. But I'm of a different opinion. I would say this is simply a view of their tactic, their new tactic to ensure that we do not win. So I want to present a more balanced approach on this entire thing. A more balanced approach because, yes, I have skimmed this article, only skimmed it, but I can tell you right now, I can see the exact language that these studios are using to try to appear like they're capitulating, but it is the language that I have covered over the last 6 years, and I will reference most of those videos that I've done over the last 6 years to show you, no, this is not what they mean. And oh, by the way, I am putting the link for this Variety article in the description of this video, and I'll be putting it in the background as I go over the entire thing. Someone had made a comment last video that it was very off-putting for me to put text in the background and talk about it. Well, if you find that off-putting because you're reading it as I'm actually speaking about the entire thing, just stop at the first, go read the article, come back. Or you could always pause it, or you could watch the video twice. Reading it once and then listening to me the second time, that would be great. Anyways, before I get into this article, I just want to let everyone know there are 2 links in the description for my 3 graphic novels. If you want to see actual material that listens to the audience and gives them what they want instead of what we're going to go over here, then you should click on one of those links in the description and go on over and see if one of my graphic novels is for you. We're looking at some of the beautiful art for my graphic novels in the background. There are 2 superhero graphic novels and 1 return to form for low fantasy. They are stories focused on the idea of a true traditional hero and also focusing on, in the creative aspect, merit above all else. So again, if that sounds interesting to you, click on one of those links in the description. But let's get into this article because it is fairly long, certainly for a video, and I'm going to probably read the entire thing. It begins. On August 28th, Amanda Steinberg, the lead of the Star Wars series The Acolyte, posted an 8.5-minute video to her Instagram stories about Lucasfilm's abrupt decision not to pick up the show for a second season just a month after season 1 finale streamed on Disney+. It's not a huge shock for me, Stenberg said. Since the series was announced in 2020, she continued, we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language towards us. Now, first off, stop right there, and I'll have to say that I'm sure the people who are going to be lauding this article as us winning are going to cherry pick a few things out of it and say, see, they're doing things that they should be doing in order for us to get back to normal, fan-based entertainment. But if you look at the entire article, what do you have in the second paragraph? Well, you have poisoning of the well. You have Variety saying that all that they are to discuss in this article, and they do use this language over and over again throughout the article. Again, as I scanned it, I could see, but they're poisoning the well. They're saying everything that we're about to describe is hyper-conservative bigotry, vitriol, prejudice, and hatred. So you can understand right from the get-go that this is not them giving into the fandoms, giving them what they want, what they demand as fandoms. No, this is them saying, well, they're hateful, bigoted people and conservative, obviously. So let's find a new way to get around them, or at the very least, get around what they're saying. The article continues. In other words, The Acolyte was the latest high-profile target of toxic fandom, the catch-all term for when fan criticism curdles from good faith dissatisfaction into a relentless negative, often bigoted online campaign against either the project or its stars or creative leaders. In a franchise economy increasingly dependent upon established audience devotion to drive the bottom line, the threat of toxic fandoms poisoning that enthusiasm has become a seemingly intractable headache for almost every studio, and it's only getting worse. Okay, again, a few things to pick out here. First of all, it's Variety, so they like to use highfalutin language like curdles, because, of course, this article is not for your average, everyday individual. This is for your high society people who understand highfalutin language. Number 2, you see how they hang a lantern on the fact that, well, hang a lantern is a writer's term where They tried to disguise something which seems a little bit too obvious to be there by having one of the characters call it out and say, look, it's there. But they're doing the exact same thing here by saying, you see, we just poisoned the well in the last paragraph. Now we're going to ensure that you don't think of us as poisoning the well by saying the exact same thing about our opponents, which is this toxic fandom, because they're saying the toxic fandoms are poisoning the enthusiasm. And third, the entire paragraph is them basically saying that fan criticism goes from good faith dissatisfaction into a relentless negativity that's based upon bigotry, which again is pointing back to what they said just the paragraph before. It's all conservative bigotry, vitriol, prejudice, hatred. However, they don't recognize in any way, shape, or form the fact that this exists because we, as fandoms, started about 8 years ago, maybe 10, actually giving them good faith dissatisfaction and criticisms. And what did they say? Well, they said, your actual good faith criticisms are nothing but conservative bigotry, vitriol, prejudice, and hate. Just from the history of my channel and other channels like mine, we covered most intently the comic book industry, and we would use the hard numbers, the sale numbers of the comic books to say, look, these things are not selling well. You can barely sell 7,000 copies of these comics per month worldwide. Obviously, people don't want to read it. And what did they do? Well, they simply got rid of those numbers so that we could not view them anymore. That was a good faith dissatisfaction with the entertainment that they were focusing on and producing. And we were saying, get back to something we actually want. But no, they didn't want any of that. And sure, I understand that some people do exactly what they're talking about here. They have turned from a good faith dissatisfaction into relentless negativity, but that relentless negativity is the only way that they're going to listen to anybody. So long story short, we did not create this situation. We are dealing with this situation through the only avenue that you have left for us as fans to deal with this situation. You created this situation. Anyways, I better keep on going. It continues. It comes with the territory, but it's gotten increasingly loud in the last couple of years, says a veteran marketing executive at a major studio. People are just out for blood, regardless. They think the purity of the first version will never be replaced, or you've done something to upset the canon of a beloved franchise, and they're going to take you down for doing so. Again, what did I just say? Last paragraph? People are out for blood regardless because you don't listen to actual good faith arguments. Secondly, this executive is saying right here that people are getting upset because they're changing something within the canon, and in so doing, tinkering with, as he says, the purity of the first version of whatever it is they're working on. But hold on a second here. Last paragraph, it just said, in a franchise economy increasingly dependent upon established audience devotion to drive the bottom line, etc., etc. So the article actually acknowledges that your bottom line is dependent on a franchise devotion, and then you're saying, but they're not allowing us to change the franchise. Oh, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, yeah, we're going to mine this franchise for all it's worth and get more money out of it, but we're going to change the entire franchise so that the canon doesn't actually stick, that the people we're looking to give money to us don't actually get what they think they're going to get. You see the problem here? You see how the marketing executive can't actually pick up the problem here. So how's about if you're mining a franchise and it's canon, you don't tinker around with canon? That's really simple. But at the same time, do you notice how he talks about it in these vague terms about upsetting the canon? Yeah, you're not just upsetting canon, you're taking the whole board and flipping it and saying, oh, this is the same thing you're used to. No, it's not. I did an entire video about the Writers Guild of America. This was what, last year, 2 years ago? They had a Zoom call with comic book writers and showrunners and executive producers of these shows that are going to be taking established science fiction and fantasy and putting it onto the small screen and the big screen. And on this 2-hour Zoom call, what was their topic? Their topic was queering legacy characters. How to take characters that were 20, 30, 40, 80 years old and turn them queer. That's not tinkering with canon in a tiny little way, as this executive producer seems to downplay it here. That's flipping the board. It continues. Sometimes toxic fandoms behave reactively. A House of the Dragon episode featuring two female characters kissing and an episode of The Last of Us focusing on a gay couple were both review bombed. The practice of mobbing sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb with negative user reviews, which gained mainstream attention following the premiere of the 2017 Star Wars The Last Jedi. And an entire YouTube ecosystem is devoted to declaring projects like The Marvels and The Boys woke garbage, among other pungent sobriquets. By the way, they're, again, highfalutin language. A pungent sobriquet, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but is basically a derogative nickname. And, oh, by the way, I am one of these YouTube channels. I am part of this ecosystem that is devoted to declaring these projects, like The Marvels, woke garbage. So let me just give my take on it, since you're calling me out here, at the very least, on what you said over the last paragraph. I'll just touch briefly on the first two statements because I'm not really that familiar with House of the Dragon or The Last of Us as a television show, but I'll ask this question. Are these two female characters kissing in House of the Dragon actually in the material that is where it's derived from? I don't know. I highly doubt it, but I don't know. If it's not, there's the answer to your question right there. See my last statements about flipping the tables on your Canon while still trying to extract money from people who love the Canon. And for The Last of Us, again, not super familiar with the entire thing, but isn't the entire premise of The Last of Us the fact that you have this girl which is immune to this, fungus that is basically turning people into zombies? And she's the last hope of the entire human race because she will reproduce and then the human race will be immune to this entire thing? Doesn't it make no sense whatsoever to try to put in gay couples in this entire thing? It makes zero sense. Again, not super familiar, but that's what I take from it. Same thing happened when I was watching, The Last Ship. You had this ship full of people that had avoided the catastrophe of a plague that wiped out most of humanity, and so the problem of the entire show was the fact that you didn't have enough people left in order to keep society running, and yet the producers had to stick into the show that when the guy who was a sailor was going off to see a girl who lived on land and had also escaped, he had to make sure that he didn't get her pregnant. That makes zero sense! You have a society that is begging for more people, and yet you have to put your birth control message into this video, into this show? Zero sense. And it was shoved in there sideways. This thing stuck out like a sore thumb. And I said, yeah, guess I'm done with this show. Anyway, but again, this Variety article does not acknowledge the very last part, which is why this entire YouTube ecosystem, which I'm a part of, actually exists. It references why it exists in part because of the 2017 review bombing of Star Wars The Last Jedi, but it doesn't go into what that exactly was. What that was the fact that people actually didn't like this movie, and the more and more people that got on the site to try to tell the producers, the studios, that they didn't like it by having the one vote that they could actually have, these people were again demonized, ignored, and then Rotten Tomatoes was pressured into changing the entire score, manipulating the entire thing so it didn't appear as bad as it actually was. So why do we exist? We exist because there were systems wherein we could acknowledge our dissatisfaction and you manipulated them so we couldn't do so. Once again, we tried good faith dissatisfaction and you simply squashed it. So here I am, and here other people like me are, part of this YouTube ecosystem that calls out woke garbage. You don't like it? It's your problem because you created the problem. It goes on. Just as frequently, the backlash begins before the project has seen the light of day. The Reddit mega thread dedicated to outrage over Bridgerton casting a black woman, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce her name, as the love interest for Francesca. Then they give other examples. Social media epitaphs directed at the actors of color cast as elves and dwarves in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and death threats aimed at Leslie Jones during the press tour for 2016's Ghostbusters. Okay, Variety, you want to go there? Let's go there. First of all, as far as I know, the show Bridgerton is about a noble family in England during the period of the first half of the 1800s. Now, again, not really familiar with this entire show, but it sounds like, since you have two women here, you're having a love interest between two women, one of them who's black, in a noble family in early 1800s England. I really don't think that's historically accurate. And what you're trying to present to people here, what you're trying to draw people in for and get their money from, is historical recreation drama. And again, that's just like poking your eye in the canon of actual history. That is you inserting your propaganda into a piece of entertainment. And you wonder why people are upset. Same with, as they say here, actors of color being cast as elves and dwarves in Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. This is a story which is about late 1800s, early 1900s countryside of England. Tolkien, in his own words, is trying to create a mythology for England. Not to mention the fact that, and if I get this wrong, one of you Tolkien fans, correct me in the comments, that's fine, but isn't one of the threats of the entire Middle-earth the dark-skinned people that come out of the East? So yeah, whether or not you like that part of Tolkien doesn't matter. That's a part of the canon. You're flipping the table over. You're saying, oh, by the way, come and give us money for these Tolkien stories, which Tolkien would probably absolutely be disgusted over. And just a quick word on that last little bit at the end, where they're saying that Leslie Jones received death threats over the 2016 Ghostbusters. Now, if you've been watching this video instead of just listening to it, you might see the hyperlinks that they're giving for a lot of the stuff that they're claiming. There's no hyperlinks there. Where are these supposed death threats? I'm sure if you had actual evidence of these supposed death threats, you'd have a hyperlink to them because you'd want people to know that they actually exist. You don't show me any of that here. Gee, I wonder why I'm a little skeptical that she received any kind of death threats. It continues. Perhaps the greatest irony of this phenomenon is the disproportionate impact these toxic fandoms have relative to their actual number. The vast majority of any fandom are casual fans, says John Van Critters, VP of Star Trek Brand Development, who has been with the storied franchise since the 1990s. The number of people who live and die on their franchises are very, very few. And then those who come after things that they espouse to love with venom are a really, really tiny subset of that already smaller subset of fandoms. It's just much easier to see it now. I don't know that it's really that much broader than where things were in 1995. It's just that the bullhorn wasn't there. Okay, again, want to go there? Let's go there, Variety. If you're saying that these are a tiny minority of people, then we don't have to listen to them. Why in the world do we have to listen to all this garbage that you're putting into our entertainment that has to do with things like the rainbow flag community? They are a tiny minority in our entire population. Why should we actually have any of that then? Let's not listen to these people, especially when they complain. Because if you want to apply those rules, let's apply those rules. But no, you want to have a double standard for you. So it's a tiny fraction of a community who's actually shouting for this stuff. Why in the world do we listen to them? Why listen to one side and not the other? And if both sides are a tiny fraction, is there a difference between those two tiny fractions? Yeah, there is. What's the difference? The tiny fraction of people who are actual fans and are complaining because you're actually disrupting, let's say, the canon of your fandom, are the people, A, you want money from, and B, who are willing to give you money. There is zero evidence, and I've gone over this over and over again, especially with comics, zero evidence that these quote-unquote woke people and their rainbow-colored brand actually sells. So, again, if you're looking for money and you're looking to milk that fandom, you're making those people, those rabid fans, the tentpole of holding up this entire franchise so that the rest of society, these casual fans, can actually be exposed to it, then yeah, you're gonna have to listen to them. It continues. For some, combating that bullhorn amounts to acting as if they can't hear it, particularly when it's a negative, toxic conversation we don't even engage, says a TV marketing executive. Like with toxic people, you try not to give it too much oxygen. One principal concern is that reacting to those kinds of attacks risks alienating fans who are unhappy with creative choices about a franchise but haven't tipped over into abusive behavior. So a studio may attempt to amplify friendlier voices instead. We'll reply to comments that are positive and elevate those things, says the TV exec. Okay, so here's the entire problem with this, and I've done multiple videos on this subject. I've covered this during some of the Comic-Cons where they had panels where these people who work for Marvel say, we need to shut out. They had an entire panel about it. They need to shut out any negativity that is directed towards them by the fans. So yeah, you're shutting out any negativity. You're discounting a lot of people who actually might have some legitimate concerns. And again, maybe those people are shouting because you didn't listen to them the first time. And, oh, by the way, how far does this excluding people who talk about these negative subjects actually go to? Well, if you're on any kind of forum, or even if you remember, I think it was the Joe Quesada incident within comics, you had somebody who was completely on his side, completely on the side of this woke garbage, and he was combating the other side saying, X, Y, and Z is why we need to do this. And he tried to rope, I think it was Joe Quesada, one of the major creatives at Marvel Comics, into the entire conversation. And he said, if you keep disputing with these people, if you keep talking to them, even to argue against them, I'm going to block you. Why? Because you can't even give them enough oxygen to try and discuss anything with them. So that's their level of engagement. That's their level of denial. You can't have any negative comments whatsoever. You can't even reference those negative comments or you're going to get blocked. So while I kind of understand why you don't interact with toxic people, the fact that you label anybody who disagrees with you a toxic person is a problem, especially since, number one, all of your metrics to qualify someone as toxic are subjective, and two, because of the fact that you people who are creatives within the industries right now are so effeminate, so sensitive to every last piece of pushback of any kind that you see everything as being hateful and toxic. So number one, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Number two, if you want to actually engage with these people in a way where you can separate the wheat from the chaff, what you would call good faith arguments that are against you, then how's about you actually go back to metrics which are objective instead of subjective? But no, you won't do that. Again, see my previous comments about the fact that they completely deleted our ability to look at sales numbers for comics. Because when we came at them with the completely objective, they said, well, no, we don't have to listen to that. We actually have to shut that out. So again, too bad you created this situation. Which leads right into their next statement. It says, still, toxic fandoms have grown so pernicious that they've become a fact of life for many. And so powerful that while talent, executives, and publicists will privately bemoan the issue, fear of inadvertently triggering another backlash kept several studios from speaking for this story, even on background. As one rep put it, it's just a lose-lose. I think that actually sums up the entire thing that I'm trying to make here. This is not a win for us. Why? Because these people are saying right out they don't want to speak on this story. It's just a lose-lose for them if they do speak on this story, which says that if they actually told the truth and put the truth out there about what they're doing and why they're doing it, the fans would backlash against this entire thing. So they're just not going to speak. They're not going to give you that information. They certainly haven't changed their minds. Obviously, or they would say that, they would be truthful about it, but they haven't. So again, this entire thing is, how do we get around the toxic fandom? How do we deal with it because it is growing out of control so that we no longer are in control of whether or not our shows actually do well, our movies, our comic books, our video games? No, you're not in control. The fans are in control because they are the ones with the money. Too bad, boo-hoo for you. It continues. Those who did talk with Variety all agreed that the best defense is to avoid provoking fandoms in the first place. In addition to standard focus group testing, studios will assemble a specialized cluster of superfans to assess possible marketing materials for a major franchise project. They're very vocal, says the studio exec. They will just tell us, if you do that, fans are going to retaliate. These groups have even led studios to alter the projects. If it's early enough and the movie isn't finished yet, we can make those kinds of changes, says the executive. All right, so this is the part where I'm sure you're going to get a flurry of videos, people saying, listen, we're actually winning. Look, they're putting in these focus groups of superfans, clusters of superfans, so that they can tell the studios people are going to retaliate against X, Y, and Z. Therefore, you should change that. Is this going to work? No chance in hell. Why? Because I just spent the last, 20 minutes or more talking about how they haven't changed their mind. They're not going to change their message. They're going to still put the exact same stuff in there. They're just looking for subtler ways in order to propagandize the entire audience and sell them something that they don't actually want because it's not actually part of the fandom, because it's against canon, of what they came to buy to begin with. Secondly, what is this cluster of superfans going to look like? Well, we know exactly what this cluster of superfans is going to look like. They did it for the Marvel's movies, the last ones that came out, I think a year ago or so. They had clusters of superfans do reviews of these projects and just gush over them. Why? Because they weren't superfans at all. They were hand-selected people who were going to agree with everything the studio did. And again, whole bunch of those videos about Marvel movies. You see, I think it even references it down further in this article. They don't even see people who are conservative and complaining in this hateful, bigoted way as being fans at all. Therefore, you're not part of the superfans if you're not a fan. Therefore, they're not going to actually have people on these focus groups that are actually going to understand what conservative people, or people who just want straight up good stories, or people who want good canon development, those people are not going to be there. They've already been discounted as fans itself, so they're not super fans, so they're not there. So they're not going to understand that, nor are they going to give this information to the people at the studios. It's just not going to happen. And again, I did videos about these super fan discussions on podcasts from Marvel.com, and what they classify as a superfan is a superfan of current day thing, of current day message. Those are the people that they classify as superfans. Some of these people who were supposed superfans of comic book stories have never even read comic books before. So yeah, this means zero. If I'm wrong, I will happily eat crow. But I could just see it right now, some person who's an actual fan and giving their actual opinion on what they should take out, he will be bounced from this focus group because he's being obviously toxic and bigoted and hateful. And again, they've already made that caveat up above in this article that, yeah, you have to separate those. Where do you cut the line? Where do they cut the line about you don't even listen to anybody with these negative opinions because you might interact with some of those toxic people? Yeah, they've already drawn that line. You're not getting across it. Not to mention the fact that I've done several videos talking about how you had people writing articles who wanted to work for Marvel Comics or on the Star Trek shows, and they had to actually hide the fact that they were a fan of these products or they would not get hired. Again, their definition here of superfan discounts the entire thing that they're saying as being anything that's going to be positive in the direction we would want it to go. Of the direction any healthy fandom and people who actually enjoy that fandom want it to go. It continues. Several studio insiders say they often put their talent through a social media boot camp. In some cases, when a character is intentionally changing a franchise status quo, studios will, with the actor's permission, take over their social media accounts entirely. When things get really bad, especially involving threats of violence, security firms will scrub talent information from the internet to protect them from doxing. Okay, so again, right here, they're admitting that they have characters that are going to challenge the franchise status quo. I'm sorry, but once again, if you're depending on the people who love the status quo as part of a fandom to be the tentpole to hold up your entire franchise so that you can get in people who are not familiar with that franchise, and you're taking a sledgehammer to the status quo, then no, they're not going to like it. And, of course, you're going to label it as toxic. So, in order for them to flip the board on Canon, once again, they need to, as they say, put their talent through social media boot camps. Why? Because, again, they can't say what they actually want to say. They can't give you the actual reason they want to give you why they're flipping the board. Why? Because you will react in a negative way if you're an actual fan. And again, this is after they just said they're going to have these super fan focus groups. If after that you're still going to do this exact thing, inserting your propaganda into these entertainment systems, then yeah, you're going to have the exact same problem. And oh, by the way, I love the fact that they freely admit that, yeah, these actors, they don't actually run their social media accounts. It's just somebody from the studio that runs it on their behalf, pretending to be them. And in addition to all that, you would think perhaps someone on their side would say to themselves, if we have to hire security firms in order to scrub the entire internet of people's information that work for us when they say something that is actually truthful and the fans don't like, perhaps we're not doing what we should do in order to retain that fandom as, again, the tentpole of what we want to sell. It continues. In some particularly egregious cases, a direct response has been necessary. In 2022, after Obi-Wan Kenobi, actor Moses Ingram denounced the hundreds of racist messages sent to her about her role. There's nothing anybody can do about this. There's nothing anybody can do to stop this hate, she says. Lucasfilm posted a statement to its Star Wars social media account that read, in part, "There are more than 20 million sentient species in the Star Wars galaxy. Don't choose to be a racist." The Star Wars account also shared a video of Obi-Wan star Ewan McGregor saying that the abuse made him sick to his stomach and that if you're sending her bullying messages, you're no Star Wars fan in my mind. So again, few things just to support everything I've said before. Number one, again, saying she's receiving all of these racist messages. No hyperlink there to prove that. So yeah, I don't think it actually exists. If it does, it would be possibly like one or two. And they're painting the entire fandom with this brush because of things that they're not actually going to show you. Number two, statement from Ewan McGregor here saying the exact same thing I just stated. If you're going to send her bullying messages, you're not actually a Star Wars fan. Therefore, there's no way you can be a Star Wars superfan because you're not a Star Wars fan, and what they consider bullying is the fact that you're negative in any way, shape, or form. And I'd also like to call out the fact that Star Wars made this statement to begin with these 20 million sentient species in the Star Wars galaxy, when I went over probably 4 years ago several articles from Variety and other Hollywood sources saying that if you have any aliens within your movies, they're just a code for black people. Because, again, the whole idiotic argument was that black people have been alienated from their motherland of Africa by being ripped out of there. So any portrait of aliens, and this was back when they were talking about Predator and Aliens, the actual movies, is a representation of a black person and their diaspora throughout, especially America. Sorry, you can't have it both ways. You can't say all aliens are X when it feeds into our narrative, but then all aliens are Y when it feeds into our narrative. Doesn't work that way. Now, into the second last paragraph where they say, later that year, the cast of Rings of Power condemned, quote, the relentless racism, threats, harassment, and abuse some of our castmates of color are being subjected to on a daily basis. Again, no hyperlink there. And actors from the Lord of the Rings film trilogy posted photos of themselves wearing clothing featuring the ears of Middle-earth creatures with multiple skin tones underneath the message, "You are all welcome here," written in Elvish. Those efforts may have had an effect. In an August interview with Amazon MGM Studios TV chief Vernon Sanders about the Rings of Power, the executive said the show hadn't experienced the same racist hostility in advance of season 2 that had greeted its 2022 debut. People have had a chance to actually engage with the show, he said. Overwhelmingly, what we've seen is that folks who came with an open mind can discuss and debate their favorite things, which takes you out of the place of that ugly conversation that happened with some folks who may have been infused with an agenda that's separate from the show itself. So yeah, here again, they're giving the blueprint of what they're saying up above with this whole Superfan thing that they're going to run everything through from now on to try to sidestep all of this controversy. First of all, as I have said, there's no statement given at all about where all of these racist comments were coming from, where they are, or have any proof of them. Why? Because it's just people saying, this is Middle Earth. These are English people. Therefore, they should look English. Or at the very least, they're European-based people. They should look European. But you see how they couch everything in subjective terms. They're saying, oh, well, this may have had an impact, all of this stuff they did to call the people racist who were saying we want Canon. Why? Because people are not engaging negatively with the show anymore within the second season. I can tell you right now why people are not reacting to season 2 as they did to season 1. It's because the people who watched season 1 said, yeah, this is garbage. I'm giving up on this entire thing. And that's what they did. They gave up on it. If they were actually looking at the metrics of how many people are watching these shows, then they would have some indication, according to these objective standards, why this is actually happening. But no, they will never go in that direction. And so, since they can't go into that direction, they just depend on their subjective interpretation of the entire thing to say, oh, well, our efforts to call people racist actually paid off. No, I'm sorry. You calling people racist just made the core demographic of people you actually want to watch your show, which, again, you acknowledged you're mining for content and money at the top of this article. You have taken those people and driven them all away. But again, as I said, they give you exactly what they mean here by what they're going to do with this super fandom focus group. It's going to be people who, as I say, have an open mind. An open mind to what? An open mind to them flipping the entire thing on its head and saying, oh no, trust us, it's still the same thing. So you're not going to get anybody who has legitimate concerns because they're going to see them as hateful. They're going to see them, as they say here, with an agenda. When the whole point of people complaining so loudly is the fact that they're opposing your agenda, which, again, this entire article proves that you have not given up on. And then the article concludes by what? By, of course, as they always do, trying to paint themselves in the brush of A, the victim, and B, the person in the right, through what? Through emotion. By saying, there is one other way to handle toxic fans on the internet. Stay off it. I'm not online, so I'm protected, says frequent Marvel star Elizabeth Olsen from WandaVision. She continues, generally, it's a lot of positive experiences of making kids happy. I ignore the other stuff. And as I said, this is exactly what they usually do at the end, trying to paint themselves in a good light by painting themselves A as victims and B as on the right side of history through emotion. Oh, it's all about the kids. We're making kids happy, so the entire thing we just said is all worth it. But, as they say, right at the end, ignore the other stuff. Guess what the other stuff is? It's us. The other stuff is the people who actually have concerns. Maybe those people have become very vocal. Maybe those people have become very impassioned about the way that they make their complaints. And it's all because you didn't listen to us in the first place. You took all the legitimate ways that we could actually complain and say, this is garbage, and either shut them down or called us racist, bigoted, hateful people. So no, anybody who covers this article and says, this is a positive win for us, it's not. It's just them saying on the other side, well, look, we have to be more subtle. We have to go back to being subtle, really, about how we push our agenda so that we mitigate all of this backlash. That's it. That's all they're saying. They're saying the quiet part out loud again. They're letting us know that they're going to use subterfuge once again, which, as the TV executive from Star Trek says, yeah, we've been dealing with that since the 90s. Yeah, they've been doing this for decades now. They're just getting called out on it now, and they need to find new ways so they can continue to mine the fandoms for all of their money and not get any backlash, not get any negative comments, not be subject to anything that's going to show them in a bad light. That's it. So far be it from them removing their message, far be it from them removing their propaganda from entertainment. They're saying, oh no, our propaganda isn't working. Quick, fire up the propaganda machine so people don't actually know that this is what we're doing. So, If I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about this. And I'm sorry about ranting through this entire video. This is why I usually don't do first reads of material with my microphone in front of me, because I become a little bit impassioned. But yeah, leave me a comment, tell me what you think about all this, and click on that icon in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe. Both of those things would be greatly appreciated. And don't forget, there are 2 links in the description and the pinned comment for my 3 graphic novels. I will be playing a very short trailer, about 1.5 minutes, for my low fantasy graphic novel after I'm done speaking, just to give you a little bit of a better idea of what the story is like as well as the art for my 80-page plus graphic novels. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I'll see y'all later. Bye.
An age ago, the beating heart of our people was a king who knew only victory. He wanted nothing more than an honorable death on the battlefield. Yet, none could match him, and so he wandered the earth, becoming lost in time and tide. Then we too lost our honest purpose, while silk-clad men sat upon the throne. But tremble now, all cities that lay under the stars, for out of the shadows and mists of the land of promise, our courage has been rekindled, our heart has returned, and the world will burn.